firing on all four. And thousands of you have been, literally thousands of you have been sending us the questions you'd like us to put to the Education Secretary and former Vaccines Minister on your behalf by email, by Twitter and Instagram. We'll get going in 60 seconds.
Yes. We want as many people as possible to take up the offer of a vaccine against COVID-19.
Hello.
How's it been?
This is real progress, but we know there's much more to do.
Okay, I'm just hearing a Nadeem Sahawi Education Secretary.
OK. Mr Sahawi have been allies and supporters of Boris Johnson for many years.
You're enjoying your new role, sir?
I am the Secretary of State for Education, newly appointed by my boss, the Prime Minister.
Yay.
Whether you're recently retired or trained as a teacher and have moved profession, I urge you to consider whether you might be able to spare even a day a week.
Exams in the summer are going ahead, full steam ahead.
Quite a build-up, wasn't it?
Amazing.
Here we go. We've had so many questions. So let's start off with this first one. It's a video report.
School infections are very high in England at the moment. Are you sure it's the right decision to not make masks mandatory in schools? And are you looking at any additional measures to protect children?
So that's Abid, and he's saying, should we not enforce mask wearing in schools and any further protection?
So, a really good question from Abid. If you remember when Omicron hit us, we went to Plan B. Plan B included masks in communal areas in schools. I went further because I looked at the evidence from UK Health Security Agency and, of course, some of the work we did in the department. We did an observational study of schools which had used masks in the classroom, so further than just in communal parts. And we did that to make sure that the reopening of schools in January went as smoothly as we could make it. And, of course, we had schools order test kits so that secondary school children can be tested in that first week. We had something like 28 million test kits go out, another 17 million by end of January. Now, all of that has meant that 99.9% of schools are open. We're seeing actually attendance begin to tick upwards. So we're at 89% attendance. 99.9% of schools, as I say, are open. I think the balance, because we know that masks in the classroom does inhibit learning, much harder to communicate, much more difficult for children to learn. And I think now we're at a stage where we're probably going to be one of the first major economies in the world to transition this virus from pandemic to endemic. I think it's right that we removed masks in the classroom as soon as we could. And as the Prime Minister said yesterday at the dispatch box, that on the 21st of February, when we're back after half-term, he will set out the plan of how we're going to live with COVID. And if the data continues to move in the right direction, because we are data-driven, then we will remove all restrictions a month early.
We will come back to that, but we've got so many questions to go through. This is from Joanne Taylor.
I live in extra care. Care managers here have been and are really struggling to recruit carers and catering staff bending over backwards, the vulnerable being held back repeatedly from learning. So in levelling up for inequality, why not extend the vital help being deployed to hospitals currently by our armed forces to within our care sector also?
Great question.
Really great question. And I know that the Health Secretary has been paying a lot of attention to the care sector. He's put hundreds of millions more funding to make sure that the care sector can get over the sort of the challenge of Omicron and, of course, people being off sick and that staffing challenge. That's happening. And I know that he will do everything in his power to make sure that that support continues to be in place for the care sector. It's an important sector. You remember during the vaccination programme, you showed my clip as the Vaccines Minister, we focused very much in the first phase of the vaccination programme on getting into care homes and getting those most vulnerable protected as quickly as possible. But I know the Health Secretary is looking to make sure whatever he can do to mitigate against the staff shortages he's doing.
But reducing, you were talking about the self-isolation and the fact that it could end a month early. I mean, what is that actually based on? Is it going to be based on the science? There was a YouGov poll that says that 75% of Britons want the rules that are in place at the moment to remain as such. 48% want them forever.
Well, as I said, we're going to be led by the data. So if the data continues to move in the right direction, so if I look at my own department, we look at attendance data and absenteeism data, then we are in a better place this week than we were
But what about the number of people that are actually contracting it?
So, again, of course, we'll be led by the data. At the moment, as I did when I got Omicron, I self-isolated immediately and then waited until I tested negative twice, and then, before I could actually come out of isolation. I couldn't come out on day 5 or 6 because I was still testing positive. I had it quite severely in many ways. The important thing is that we follow the data, and what the Prime Minister is saying is on the 21st he will come to Parliament, set out the plan for living with COVID, and if the data continues to move in the direction it's moving in at the moment, then we will be able to, by the 24th, a month early, be able to effectively...
I ask you about that. Given that you brought up your COVID and you had it quite severely, if you... I know you're fully jabbed and you've had it before, I'm guessing, so...
No, it's my first time.
OK, so how can you contract it if you've had all these 3 vaccines? How do you convince people that it's a good idea to have the vaccinations?
Well, all I can say to your viewers is I think without the vaccine and the booster, I'd have had it even worse, my doctor said, because it's your physiology, and as he reminded me, and I knew this when I was Vaccines Minister, that it's your body's reaction to COVID that will determine how severe or asymptomatic you might be. I've had family members who had no symptoms whatsoever. In my case, it got worse. It got into my chest, and I had to sort of increase the sort of level of medical help I needed. But he said, by day 4 or 5, it got into my chest and it started really affecting my breathing. And he
so you found it
put me
difficult to breathe?
On heavier medication. And then he said, 1 more day and I might have to put you onto steroids or something else that's heavier. But it luckily started to then recover. My temperature went up to 39.5.
Whoa.
It was not pleasant. But he reminded me, and he said, whenever you go on Kay's programme, that if you hadn't had the vaccines and the booster, he said, I guarantee you would be in hospital and probably intubated.
That's not a good sign, is it? Because if people
so
are intubated...
get your vaccine and get your booster. It's never too late. The offer is evergreen from the NHS. If you haven't had a vaccination, go and get your vaccine. I promise you, this thing is not like a cold. It's not like a mild flu. If it hits you severely and you're one of the unlucky ones, it is horrific. It's not good.
Do you think you could have died if you hadn't had the vaccines?
I certainly, if I hadn't had the vaccine, I would have been in big trouble, according to my doctor.
OK, thankfully you did, and you're here. Let's move on to school ventilation, should we? This is from Nicola Cackett. She says, all my niece's classroom windows have to remain open to ventilate the room, but there's only one small radiator in the room. My niece is wearing thermal leggings under several layers of clothes and keeping her coat on in class and is still cold all day. Would your cabinet sit under these conditions?
Nicola, so what we did is we sent out 350,000 CO2 monitors to make sure that pretty much all the classrooms in our schools are monitored. We then got the data back and did our own modelling that suggested that probably around 9,000 air filtration units, air purifiers, will be needed. So we ordered those, and those are going out to the schools that can't easily ventilate. But actually, if you look at what we did with schools, the vast majority were able to cope and effectively ventilate classrooms relatively easily. But those that couldn't, I made sure we had the air purifiers.
By opening the windows, but I mean, we're looking at a Times Educational Supplement magazine talking about one particular school, £50,000 for 1 month's electricity use and £13,000 for gas. £54,000 higher than the amount it normally would have to fork out.
Yeah, absolutely. One part of the thing that I'm doing at the moment is making sure we, in the department, keep our eye on the cost of energy in the education estate. Now, the good news is the new schools we're building, and we're building 500 new schools, they're all at net zero operation. They are really unbelievably energy efficient. But that's, you know, we still have 24,300 plus schools, so it puts it in perspective where we're trying to sort of mitigate for those schools that we can, but we're keeping an eye as well on the energy costs and the pressure. We had a good settlement during the spending review in terms of school budgets. So for secondary schools, we're at £6,150 per pupil, and for primary, we're at £4,800.
£4,000 more than they normally pay. I mean, is that something you'll look at?
We are looking and making sure we're monitoring the cost of energy in schools and the impact on schools. So the one thing we did on part of the COVID mitigations is a fund back to the question around social care, similar for schools, for if they needed temporary staff to help with staff shortages. Okay. We put a fund together, but we made sure at the SR as well, we actually got a good funding settlement, because we knew that actually the cost of things like energy was going to go up.
OK, I have to move on. There's literally so many questions for you. This is Holly Stafford. Holly has written this question for you, Secretary of State. Where's the catch-up tutoring we were promised? My daughter is in her GCSE year and has received nothing.
Holly, get in contact with your school. Every school has the opportunity to take up the tutoring programme. We are, first term of this year, have done as many tutoring hours as the whole of last year. We are committed to doing 6 million tutoring programmes of 15-hour courses for children.
15% of its target at the moment?
Well, no, because actually, there are 3 pillars, and whether it's the Times Education Supplement or somewhere else that mentioned that, they only looked at one of the pillars. So we've got 3 pillars. One is school-led tutoring, which is the most successful, because schools told us, actually, why don't you just give us the money and we will, hire in a tutor that we think is the right individual to help children recover from the sort of COVID catch-up.
Kevin Collins, I mean, lots of people, well, just you'll know her, obviously, as former education catch-up czar. He quit last June, saying that the plans for pupils were feeble. Well,
my very strong view is you invest and then you evidence what you do. So we're making a £5 billion investment in recovery. Now, what I did was I looked at the evidence. The evidence is that those, as with the question just now, with the least time left in education, so 16 to 19-year-olds need the most effort. So I went to the Chancellor and said, look, I need 800 million for recovery for the 16 to 19-year-olds. He gave me that. And then I wanted more money for secondary and primary for disadvantaged children, again, because it's important that we focus on disadvantaged children to make sure they recover as well. And he gave me that, which is why we managed to get the total to 5 billion. Now, tutoring is a really important part of that. We'll do 6 million tutoring blocks of 15 hours each, 100 million hours in total. Every school is eligible to come forward and have a part of that funding for the National Tutoring Programme. I want them to come forward. I want parents, and I'm writing to parents to say, look, contact your school and find out if they are taking advantage of the National Tutoring Programme, and then make sure that actually I monitor, have we caught up? Have we recovered? If we haven't, I'll go back to the Treasury and ask for more money, because what I want to do is, by the end of this Parliament, is make sure that every child has had the opportunity to recover.
OK. Perhaps one of the ways to do that is more homework or not. Raquel Dealey has written to us this morning. Morning, Raquel, if you're watching. My son is 11 and currently completes anywhere from 2 to 3 hours of homework every night. What is the Education Secretary's view on how much homework is acceptable for each student in a secondary school? What happens in your house?
Mia does a lot of work.
That's your little girl?
She's 9. The boys are now grown up and graduated. But, I mean...
2 to 3 hours is too much.
2 to 3 hours is a lot of homework. I think in many
too
ways,
much.
I suspect, Raquel, the school is rightly focused on recovery and catch-up. And I was at Hammersmith Academy a few weeks ago to see the brilliant work that the leadership team did. Gary Kinniston is a brilliant head teacher. You should have him on this programme.
OK, we will.
But they were saying to me, look, the way we're dealing with recovery is to see where the gaps are and then really focus on those for those kids. So the best thing that Raquel can do is talk to her son or daughter's teacher to...
You acknowledge, though, it's too much, 2 to 3 hours.
I think it's... Look, we've got to trust our teachers and our head teachers. They know best. If I sit on your programme and pronounce on Raquel's, child's homework, you will think that everybody in the profession will think one, he says he's the evidence-led Secretary of State, yet he's arrogantly pronouncing on this stuff. The reality is the teachers know best what each child needs to recover, and I think they're doing a great job in delivering.
OK, Raquel, I don't think you need to do he does need to do 2 to 3 hours of homework. And I had a little boy, and I would not have had him doing that amount, no matter what the Education Secretary is saying this morning. I think he's half agreeing with you anyway. What about this from Helen? This is Helen. Why have private schools been using teacher assessments under COVID as an excuse to boost their grades? The Sunday Times reports that in one case, their A-star rate went from 33% to 90% last summer.
I saw that report, and in fact, this week, I had the regulator in, Ofqual, and I discussed this with them, and they reassured me a couple of things, and I want to just reassure the viewers on this.
Do.
One is that every allegation is investigated by the exam boards, and all the records have been kept, so none of the records of the teacher assessments have been destroyed or gone away. So if there are any new allegations, they will investigate them as well. They also reassured me that actually when you look at whether it's independent schools or academies, the children who were expected to get high grades, A grades, actually achieved those. Every head teacher had to sign really, really stringent letter of verification that they followed the assessment correctly.
Looking at these grades, A-star grade at A-level reached 39.5% in 2021 compared to 16% in 2019. Something going on there.
Well, and we saw, which is why I want to go back to exams, and which is why I'm determined to go back to exams for GCSEs, AS and A-levels this summer. Look, there is no perfect system. All I can say is, from all the evidence, the best system we have is going back to examinations. We're doing that sensitively. We're doing it in a way that recognises that children's education has been disrupted. At the beginning of the week, Ofqual actually put out through the exam boards further information as to what the content of the exams will be to help those children preparing for their exams. I think that's the right thing. We're not leaping back to pre-COVID grading, because I think that would also be unfair. We're doing it in 2 steps, so going halfway and then this summer and then going back to pre-COVID next year. That's also, I think, important. So these mitigations, I think, recognise the disruption, but I think examination is the best way of making sure we deliver rigour in the system.
Though, is it? It's also saying that, if you leave it to head teachers and to teachers more generally, then they're easing up those grades.
Well, look, as I say, we saw some of that grade inflation come through because it was teacher assessed. We're going back to examination. I think that's the right thing to do. The information landed really positively on Monday, and I think the feedback from the sector, from across, from the front line, has been really positive. And students want to go back. They make their preparations. They want to go back and take the exam, whether it's GCSEs or A-levels. OK. Well,
coming up to 9:20. We're ripping through these, but still so many to go. This one, obviously, that is talking about state education. This is from David West. David, good morning to you. David wants to know, a year's fee to attend Eton is £44,000. How does that institution deserve charity status that exempts it from a whole range of taxes?
So the independent sector, 50% of them have charitable status.
Including Eton.
Including Eton. I want to see those schools do much more to open up to children from disadvantaged backgrounds. They're doing a lot already. They want to do more with us on our journey which is really my focus, which is a system that is diverse. So we have academies, we have free schools, we have independent sector. That's a good thing, I think, in an education system. They want to do more on that journey where we get every child to have a great education in every part of the country at the right time in the right place. But I think it's also important that they play their part in
What does that look like?
Well, can we get our independent schools to join us on what the evidence suggests is the best way forward, which is a family of schools that are well managed, tightly managed, really well supported in a multi-academy trust that's high performing, that we know the evidence delivers the best outcome for every child. I always tell my story. When I arrived on these shores at the age of 11, I couldn't speak a word of English, but I had parents who valued education. My mother was a dentist in Iraq, and they pushed me hard. I want the system to deliver for the child whose parents don't have that wherewithal everywhere. Whether you're in Blackpool or London or Manchester or Birmingham, that every school delivers a great quality education. And I've got the evidence of how we can do it. I want every part of the education sector to join me on that journey, including our independent schools.
But if we tax those independent private schools, then there's £1.7 billion available, according to Labour, for state schools.
So I saw that, and I also saw some of the analysis done on this, that actually, if you do that, you will not increase the tax take for the Exchequer. Actually, you'll go the other way, because many parents will come out of the independent sector and actually will add to the number of children that we would need to accommodate in the state sector. And I think that would be wrong. I follow the evidence. I will always be the evidence-led Secretary of State, as I did with vaccines, working cross-party with Sadiq Khan, who I know you've had on your programme, and Andy Burnham and Andy Street in Birmingham. I will always follow. The evidence is not there on this. Having a diverse ecosystem of education with the academy programme being clearly evidence, the best way of organising a family of schools, if they're really well supported. Not every academy, by the way, does well. There are some schools and academies that coast, and I'm going to deal with that, especially through the Levelling Up white paper with Michael Gove in those education investment areas we announced. But a lot of work to do, but I think we've got the evidence to deliver a system that delivers for every child. OK,
you touched on this, but Etros has been good enough to send us a question, so perhaps you could reiterate your thoughts on this. Why are the 2022 exams still going ahead? We've missed a year of learning due to COVID. Many topics haven't been taught, with further disruptions at only months towards the actual exams. GCSEs are setting my year up for failure. Let teachers grade us. They know what they're capable of. Etros,
I think that the best way to assess students' work is through examination. There's no perfect way, but what I've tried to do is be sensitive to the fact that your education has been disrupted, which is why we, on Monday, through the exam boards, made more information available as to what you'll be examined on, whether you're doing a GCSE, AS or an A-level, so the subject matter is much clearer for your teachers, so they can focus on those parts of the subject that will be in the examination. We are being more generous with the grading. We're not going back to pre-COVID grading this year. We're going halfway, and then we'll go to pre-COVID the year after. I think all those mitigations are the right things because they recognise that disruption that you've been through. I thank every student for the resilience they've shown. We've just done our survey, State of the Nation survey of students, and they've shown unbelievable resilience, including some real pressure on well-being and mental health, as well as, of course, recovery in their education. But real resilience, and I thank you for that. But examination is the best way and the fairest way forward. Okay. With that in mind, Mark Gower has sent us this video.
I have a maths question for the Education Secretary. Why does the government have to increase national insurance contributions for the NHS when the NHS was promised $350 million a week after leaving the EU?
Uh-oh.
Well, because we actually made that $350 million available after we left the EU for the NHS. The NHS funding is increasing to $36 billion. By $36 billion, I should say, because we recognise there's a backlog that is currently at 6 million, could be as high as 11 or 13 million before we begin to bring it down. Plus,
2 years' time. So going up for 2 years.
Yes, and actually equally importantly, I should say, that adult social care, which I know, I've been in politics a very long time, that successive governments have attempted to grapple with it, have then failed, and this government, under Boris Johnson, has actually dealt with it, and that national insurance rise. Yes.
I was looking at these figures. I mean, it's staggering. I'll share them with the viewers. I'm sure you know already. The NHS accounts for 40% of day-to-day government spending. Under Labour, it was 28%. How can we say that the NHS is value for money?
Well, because the NHS has had to deal with a global pandemic, and that has, enormous consequences, whether it is what we did with vaccines, which actually now is making us one of the most dynamic economies in the world. We'll probably be one of the first major economies in the world to transition this virus from pandemic to endemic, thanks to the NHS. But the NHS also, with the focus of the Prime Minister, has come up with a adult social care strategy that will finally work and not break people in old age, where we know this is pretty harrowing for families when they have to.
For money, is that what you're saying?
I think the NHS delivers great work. They can always improve. If you ask the NHS leadership, they're the first to say that actually reform is good. Look at what we did again with vaccine. The data we went to, from sort of fortnightly to weekly to daily data, real granularity by postcode, by ethnicity, by lots of different ways to cut and slice the data so that we can see who is being vaccinated, where, and where we need to focus resources. Data and transparency is our ally on this journey to get real reform in the NHS and to deliver better outcomes in any complex system, right? The best way you can deal with it is if you measure everything and publish it, because people then can see, and then the system will become more human and improve.
We've got time for a few more?
Yes.
I hope so. I hope so, including Fred Sirieix from First Dates. More from him in just a second. But first, this is Jane talking about long COVID.
My daughter has been battling with long COVID since March 2020. She's only in school 6 hours a week under doctor's orders and has had to drop to just 2 GCSEs because her body can't cope with the exam process. What will the government do to support these children within a discriminatory system?
Apparently something like 120,000 kids in that position.
And one of the things that we did, I met some students through First News, and they came to see me in the department, and
which is a newspaper for children,
which has a collaboration with Sky News.
It does.
And she was telling me about her struggle with long COVID, which is why under Matt Hancock, when I was back in the health department, we put serious amounts of funding into the research into long COVID and helping GPs understand and identify long COVID, because actually much of this is about diagnosis. Then that would then allow the whole system, the education system and the healthcare system, to work together to be able to help those children.
OK. We certainly touched on special education needs earlier on. Do you want to hear what Jack has to say?
As someone with an autism diagnosis, I wasn't given the support I needed at school and was quite misunderstood, which led to me being excluded, which had an impact on my education. So I'd like to ask the Education Secretary, what are the government's plans to ensure that children who have a learning difficulty or a developmental disability are being provided with adequate support in schools and that their needs are met?
Handsome young man, isn't he? Hi, Jack. A very good morning if you're watching. Do you feel that you're letting people like Jack down?
I think we're going to do more for Jack. So one of the things that I'm doing is the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities Review, and I'll be publishing. Basically, I'm looking at the whole system to see how we can deliver better outcomes for Jack and for his education and his family and his health. So, the reforms that we delivered when we first came into office in the coalition government were good, so that children can have an education, health and care plan. But we need to revisit those to, I think, make sure that they're working everywhere and they're working consistently. Now, that's my sort of review, the green paper, as we call it in Westminster jargon. But I didn't wait for that. I also went to the Chancellor at the spending review, and I said, look, we need more money because we need more places, more sufficiency in the system now. And so he gave us 2.6 billion to invest in more places for specialist places as well as mainstream places, because I think you need both.
And what would you say to Jack specifically when he feels that he'd been let down?
I say sorry, and I say I will do better, I promise you. One of the opportunities I have is the stars have aligned nicely. I've got a schools white paper which we will publish next month, which will outline my vision for the education system and how we deliver that great education for every child at the right place at the right time in every part of the country. But with it, I've got the Children's Social Care Review and the SEND Review. And actually, for the first time in the Department of Education, we can actually knit all three together, because you need, for children with special educational needs, you need the school system to be equally responsive as the healthcare system needs to be.
It's not just kids that are struggling at school. This is from Richard from Bedfordshire. Hi, Richard. He has written to us to say, my wife is a head teacher in a small rural lower school, performing the duties of 7 other people, working until 9 or 10 o'clock most nights, on the verge of some kind of breakdown. What is a school supposed to do when a class has 3 pupils with specific requirements and no support staff due to sickness?
Richard, through you, Richard, I want to thank your wife, because these are the sort of stories that make me feel that we've got to
burn out, though.
Which is why we're putting so much effort to make sure that you saw in your clip when we started the programme of my call for retired teachers to come forward for this period when we're dealing with the pandemic as we transition it. Omicron hit us hard, especially on staffing, and actually what Richard's wife has done is fantastic. I've seen it.
Is it going to get easier for her?
It will be. Obviously, because as we transition this virus, as we see infection rates begin to drop further, we're seeing teacher absence also beginning to tick down. We're at 9% absence in the system this week, which is a tick down a little bit. It needs to come down further. Then things will get better and better. And of course, supply teachers are an important part of that, which is why my big call before Christmas to say anyone who can volunteer, come forward, join the supply agencies. And we actually did a call round to about 10% of supply agencies and found that around 500 people had actually come forward from just the 10% of agencies, which is good, which means there's at least a few more thousand people who wouldn't have come forward, who came forward. Still not enough. Still feel that's an inadequate answer for Richard's wife. I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart, because 99.9% of schools are open because of people like Richard's wife and the support that she gives those children.
Do you ever watch First Dates on Channel 4?
Yeah,
Syriac.
Yes.
Well, he's got a question for you.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
We only have about 130 catering colleges in total in the UK. This is not enough to produce the necessary manpower to sustain hospitality, let alone grow it. So what is the plan for professional education?
Thanks, Red.
Great question. And one of the first visits I made was Westminster Kingsway, who have a brilliant catering programme in their college. Really fantastic. But we need more. And we
don't have enough waiting staff.
Correct.
People don't see it as a job or as a career. They just see it as something to do as a transition. And Fred's saying that's not good enough.
Absolutely right, which is why my big focus, and we are in National Apprenticeship Week this week, is to make sure that we continue to invest in apprenticeships. We're going to raise... Rishi's given us 2.7 billion by 2024 to invest in apprenticeships. That's good. We want to see more of those in hospitality industry, and I want to see some... we now have some of the best brands of restaurants and hotels in the United Kingdom. They all need more staff. High quality training is so important to this.
So what are you going to do?
And so I want them to come forward. We will do everything in our power in the department to facilitate making this happen. We're just doing a similar thing in the creative industry with the BBC. Actually, Tim Davie came to see me.
See, it was going so well until you said that.
I'm sorry. I am sorry. But they've done it. But they're great because actually, in many ways, creative industries has lots of long tail of small businesses who might not themselves want an apprenticeship, full time, and so having the ability to have that, part-time and sharing of apprenticeships is really important for the creative
So
industry.
Fred can reach out to you and...
Fred, come and see me. I absolutely want to see him. I've seen other sort of major players in the hospitality industry who want to do the same in Birmingham and in other parts of the country where they want to maybe build a new facility, a bigger facility for the catering industry.
We'll put you two together then. Right, this is a text from Everyone Knows Dave. I'm not sure I do, but we'll go with it, Dave. What number do you get when you subtract the number of resignations in the past few days from the number of parties investigated by Sue Gray? I can see where he's going with that. The answer is apparently 11. But, we saw the picture in the Daily Mirror yesterday, didn't we, with the Prime Minister with the champagne at one of those parties. How damaging is what's been going on at Downing Street for you guys?
So, look, I think there is no doubt that the stories around parties have cut through. People were rightly angry to see that those who were making the rules have allegations put against them that they're not obeying the rules. I think the police are looking at all those allegations that Sue Gray has given them. I think they've got a reel and a half, hundreds of pages of report and pictures to look at. I think it's only right, Dave, that they should do that and do their work properly, and then I'll happily submit myself to Kay Burley and come and explain and answer any questions necessary. In terms of our focus, I can tell you, skills, schools, family is my focus. We're delivering. We're in National Apprenticeship Week this week. We've had Mental Health Week. Really, really focused delivery in my department. Similarly, in other departments across government, whether it's transport or in the Department for Energy on the cost of living crisis and the spike in gas prices globally that we've seen. The focus of this government is to recover the economy from COVID, make sure that we recover the NHS, more doctors, more nurses, more police officers on our doorstep, and make sure that we deliver the outcomes that people want to see for their children, because the best way to level up, the most valuable resource on earth is the human resource. And if I can deliver the great education for every child in our country, the opportunities I had to sit before you as Secretary of State for Education for every child, then I would have done something truly great. That is my focus, Dave. I promise you that is what I spend all of my time on.
OK, we're pleased to know that these are not my questions today, so I will not be grilling you on that, but I will in the fullness of time. Let me leave it to David Craggs. He says he describes himself as a former Conservative member, and he says, as Education Secretary, what sort of example do you think the Prime Minister's behaviour sets for young people? And what effect do you think your continued support and close association with him has on your reputation?
So, David, I take the view that you treat everybody with respect, you share the evidence with them, you explain what you're trying to achieve, and I think most people will then, I hope, join in the endeavour and on that journey. That's what I'm seeing across the board, whether I'm working with teachers and head teachers, our universities or our colleges. That is what I see. I've always done that. The Prime Minister, in my dealings with him, has always dealt with me respectfully and always engaged on the evidence and has backed me when I've said to him, I don't know whether I've told you this story, but, in the middle of the vaccination programme, we had an offer from Pfizer-BioNTech to say, we can offer you now, but you have to make a decision in a week for vaccines that you may need if there's a variant that you'd need to boost against in the winter. But you have to tell us now, so months earlier, so 7 months before. Some of the advice was, we don't need it, we're absolutely fine because this thing won't need a booster. I went to the PM and said, actually, I think we really should take this just in case. And he took that decision. Without that decision... How
much did that cost?
1.6 billion, a lot of money.
Oh, wow.
A lot of money. But nevertheless, he took that. Without that decision, we would never have a booster campaign. I promise you that, Dave, right? And so on the big calls, this Prime Minister has got them right, whether, delivering Brexit. I mean, I remember the pain of the last government where Parliament was paralysed. We couldn't do anything. But we delivered Brexit on the first vaccination programme to get the first vaccine approved anywhere in the world with Pfizer-BioNTech. I remember the first 8th of December was the date we delivered that first jab in the UK. Then the booster campaign, and now the Omicron. Pre-Christmas, there were lots of advice saying, lock down, lock down, lock down harder, right? He said, no, I'm looking at the evidence. We don't need to, because we will destroy ourselves, we'll destroy the economy, harm people's mental well-being if we lock down. On the big calls, he got them right. He came to Parliament and apologised, said, we've made a mistake, and he came back again after Sue Gray's publication and said it's not good enough to just say we made a mistake, we've got to change, and he's making those changes now.
Well, we'll see what happens when the police report back. Just as far as AstraZeneca is concerned, quite a lot of criticism for AstraZeneca. Does it do what it says on the tin?
Yes, it does. It's a great vaccine. And I tell you for why, because if you look at what we've been able to do in the UK, remember, vaccines have an impact both on your antibody levels and T cells. And T cells are sort of more dormant in your body, and they sort of awaken when the virus hits, and they really begin to help you fight the virus. Yeah. And AstraZeneca has done brilliantly for us here in the UK. And I've had 2 AstraZeneca vaccines followed by a Pfizer booster. That's a really good combination to have. Or Pfizer followed by Pfizer or Moderna, also a good combination to have. But AstraZeneca has been the workhorse of the world. Over 2.5 billion doses have protected people, around 2.5 billion, at no profit to AstraZeneca. The Oxford team, with the backing of the government, with Boris Johnson, another call from Boris, to say we won't take a profit while the pandemic is with the world. And AstraZeneca agreed to that. Their board backed that and agreed to that. That's a really great thing, and I'm incredibly proud of that.
OK. This is from Gary. I'm not sure how you'll feel about this question. Gary McCardle texting. Will your horses have to choose between heating or eating as the upcoming cost of living bites? That's in relation, of course, to the fact that you claimed for heating your stables as part of your expenses.
And I'm sorry, Gary, and I apologised at the time as soon as I discovered that. How
could it have happened?
Well, I tell you what happened exactly. So we bought a small holding, a cottage and stables that my wife looks after, and there was a meter in the stables and a meter at the house, and I thought that the heating claims that we were making were for the meter reading in the house. It turned out that actually the 2 meters were connected. As soon as I found out, I went to the parliamentary investigator and said, look, this is what happened, I'm mortified. They looked into it, they investigated thoroughly, and they found for it to be a genuine mistake, and I apologised, and I paid back the money. And I say, again, Gary...
Are you embarrassed?
It's a stupid thing to have not been able to spot, but it was a genuine mistake. And as soon as I found out, I went to the parliamentary, to IPSA, and explained, look, here's the evidence, here's what happened.
Okay.
I'm so sorry.
That was then, this is now. And we were speaking to Sadiq Khan yesterday, and this is what he said about you.
Nadhim Zahawi is the best education secretary in the last 11 years.
Wow.
A good example of a Labour politician saying good things about a Tory politician. One of the things about Nadhim, I met him 2 weeks ago, is he puts aside party politics and works for the common good. And he's also quite interested in fun, so good luck with that.
That's nice.
That is nice. It's really... I tell you what's been truly remarkable, and it's something that I think we need to do more of, is in the vaccination programme. I worked with Sadiq in London and Andy Burnham in Manchester and Andy Street in Birmingham and all the other mayors around the country. I briefed them regularly. We worked together. I shared the evidence with them, and they all stepped up. When I was children minister under Theresa May, before vaccines, children and families minister, we did tremendous work with Andy Burnham on those in care and those who are leaving care. Care Leaver Covenant, he really helped me lead on that, Andy Burnham. It's that sort of collaboration, if you follow the evidence. And we're doing the same now on skills. So the local skills improvement plans, I'll be working with Sadiq and the other mayors to make sure that we get the local skills improvement plans around the country right. That's a bottom-up approach to what skills needs are necessary in the economy. And then I've also launched the Unit for Future Skills, which is something that Singapore's had for many years. We don't have that in the UK, where we'll be able to pull in data from everywhere, HMRC, from student loan book companies, so we can see what the skills needs of the economy are for the next 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, so that I can then flex the infrastructure. I spend 86 billion a year in education. I can flex all that infrastructure to where the economy needs those skills. What does that do? It gives those kids the real opportunity for a great education and a great job at the end of it.
And the name's Zahawi, Nadeem Zahawi, and you're going to Pinewood later on, aren't you, where they film... See what I did there?
Not quite 007.
Where they film James Bond. What's the plan?
So we're going to go...
excited about going there?
I'm very excited about going. We're going to look at their apprenticeship programme. They've done a brilliant apprenticeship programme there, so we're going to have a look. I've signed an NDA, so I can't talk about what they're going to show me.
Oh, how exciting.
All I can say it's a big blockbuster production that they've got on that they're going to show me. I get a behind-the-scenes
fantastic.
peek at the work they're doing. But it's been a phenomenal success.
This was number 10, wasn't it?
This was, with the BT apprentices. That was earlier this week. They are phenomenal. I tell you, what great ambassadors for the apprenticeship programme. Any family watching this programme, if your kids are thinking about, the future, whether it's, they do A-levels and what they want to do, think about a T-level. We're going to make T-levels as famous...
I thought that stood for Tory leader, no?
Not Tory leader. It's T-levels. So I'm going to make T-levels as famous as A-levels. T-levels, I hear you ask, are a fusion between an apprenticeship and an A-level.
OK.
And you can either go to university with them. I think we've got 60 institutions now accepting T-levels, or you can go and work and have a great career with T-levels. So we're doing Microsoft T-levels. We're doing lots of other T-levels. They are going to be as famous as A-levels if I do my job right. OK, and unless I let you go, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble with your team, so I must let you go. But 45 minutes of questions out of thousands that we received, and answered them honestly and openly, and we very much appreciate it. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Secretary of State. Thank you. Thank you very much. Coming up in just a second or two, Tamara's take on our interview this morning with the Secretary of State. As I said, he was very honest, he was very open with us, and you can check it out on our iPad if you would like to. And, of course, we'll be clipping it up for you and hearing some of those in more detail in just a few moments' time. Before that, though, Tamara has been listening. Very honest, very open, I thought.
He was a lot for parents and teachers who are wondering where we go now with COVID, with the removal of all restrictions. But as we know, hundreds of thousands of children off school every week, continuing to blight their education 2 years on. A lot to get into there. I thought we started off with an interesting revelation, though, Kay, about Nadeem Zahawi's own experience of COVID. Despite being triple vaccinated, he had COVID very seriously last week, had to take strong medication, and when you asked him whether he could have died, he said if he hadn't been vaccinated, then there was a serious risk. This is what he told us. I've had family members who had no symptoms whatsoever. In my case, it got worse. It got into my chest, and I had to sort of increase the sort of level of medical help I needed. But he said, by day 4 or 5, it got into my chest and started really affecting my breathing, and he so you found it difficult to breathe? On heavier medication, and then he said 1 more day and I might have to put you onto steroids or something else that's heavier. But it luckily started to then recover. My temperature went up to 39.5. Whoa! It was not pleasant. But do you think you could have died if you hadn't had the vaccines? I certainly, if I hadn't had the vaccine, I would have been in big trouble, according to my doctor. Goodness me. But thankfully he has now made a full recovery, which is why he wasn't here actually on Monday, because he was still recovering, still testing positive. He also talked about homework. Yes, interesting. Hard to pin down where Nadeem Zahawi sits on the spectrum between Michael Gove's Education Secretary wanting to go back to rigorous learning, to cut out some of what he saw as softer subjects, and then we saw sort of Gavin Williamson battling through the pandemic. Nadeem Zahawi asked how much homework children should be doing. He said that it was for teachers to set it out, but he had a sense that 2.5 to 3 hours might be a bit too much. 2 to 3 hours is a lot of homework. I think
in many ways, I suspect, Raquel, the school is rightly focused on recovery and catch up. Look, we've got to trust our teachers and our head teachers. They know best. If I sit on your programme and pronounce on Raquel's, child's homework, you will think that everybody in the profession will think one, he says he's the evidence-led Secretary of State, yet he's arrogantly pronouncing on this stuff. The reality is the teachers know best what each child needs to recover, and I think they're doing a great job.
Talked about private schools being treated as charities as well. Labour have got a view on that, and if private schools were taxed, then there'd be an awful lot more for the state education system. He didn't necessarily think that was the case.
That's right. Nadeem Zahawi was privately educated himself. This idea that private schools should not have charitable status, they should pay more tax, is one that Labour have... Labour promised at the last election, but Tory politicians have toyed with it as well. They say you could make 1.7 billion, but other analysis, including by HMRC, shows that the problem with it is if you raise the fees a bit, the smaller private schools go bust, all those children need to go into the state sector, and you end up spending more money than you save. So it's an interesting balance there. Nadeem Zahawi said he didn't believe the evidence supported it, and so he would want to keep private schools funded the way they are.
I want to see those schools do much more to open up to children from disadvantaged backgrounds. They're doing a lot already. They want to do more with us on our journey, which is really my focus.
If we tax those independent private schools, then there's £1.7 billion available, according to Labour, for state schools.
So I saw that, and I also saw some of the analysis done on this, that actually, if you do that, you will not increase the tax take for the Exchequer. Actually, you'll go the other way, because many parents will come out of the independent sector and actually will add to the number of children that we would need to accommodate in the state sector. And I think that would be wrong. I follow the evidence. I will always be the evidence-led Secretary of State. I will always follow... The evidence is not there on this.
Interesting that he was talking... I mean, one of the questions was about the horse. We've got a lot of questions from our viewers. He claimed to heat his stables. That's always been a problem.
That's right. So Nadeem Zahawi, who now is being spoken of as a potential leadership candidate if a contest was to happen. If you look back when he's been in the news before, 2013, sort of fallout from the expenses scandal, he was told to repay almost £6,000. He had charged the taxpayer to heat his stables, which was adjoining his constituency home in Warwickshire, and he claims it was a genuine error. The bill was put all together. He said he was mortified and he had paid the money back. This is what he told us.
As soon as I found out, I went to the parliamentary investigator and said, look, this is what happened, I'm mortified. They looked into it, they investigated thoroughly, and they found for it to be a genuine mistake, and I apologised and I paid back the money. And I say, again, Gary...
Are you embarrassed?
If you think, it's a stupid thing to have not been able to spot, but it was a genuine mistake. And as soon as I found out, I went to the parliamentary, to IPSA, and explained.
Decided it was a genuine mistake, he told us. Now, he is always defending Boris Johnson as far as the Partygate is concerned.
Well, big supporter of Boris Johnson is Nadeem Zahawi, but great question about what message the Prime Minister's behaviour, setting the rules and then apparently breaking them, sends to school children and to head teachers who we know have been contacting local MPs saying, what kind of message does this send out? This was his answer.
The stories around parties have cut through. People were rightly angry to see that those who were making the rules have allegations put against them that they're not obeying the rules. I think the police are looking at all those allegations that Sue Gray has given them. I think they've got a reel and a half of hundreds of pages of report and pictures to look at. I think it's only right, Dave, that they should do that and do their work properly, and then I'll happily submit myself to Kay Burley and come and explain and answer any questions necessary.
Plenty of them still waiting for what the police have decided, that the latest photograph that we've seen that dropped yesterday. What do you think overall?
He was honest that Partygate has really cut through. Other cabinet ministers say it hasn't. He showed a lot of humility about the challenges that teachers and some children with long COVID had faced during the pandemic. He says this is not a perfect system, but in the end, he knows that he will be judged on how they reduce this enormous attainment gap that has opened up during the pandemic between the more and the less advantaged pupils. Whether that can close, whether all children who missed out will be able to recover is going to be the big challenge for him.
OK, Tamara, thanks very much indeed. Thanks a lot. So an hour with the Education Secretary. It wasn't questions from me, it was questions from you via Twitter, via Instagram, via our inbox here at Sky. We very much appreciate you taking the time to submit those questions. Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.